All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of AdTech Ad Talk. I'm joined by my co-host Adam, and we are now in the same city, so all of you better get ready.
Congrats on moving into work, Gareth. It's great to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Like, don't get me wrong, I loved Philadelphia, but I've been in New York for 72 hours, and I've had 5 meetings already, and I was here for 11 years before I stood in Philly, and it feels so nice. I was joking with someone. I was at a bar last night, and like a loud New York bar, and I was like, I don't know how to explain it, but I find this really relaxing. Like it's like a really quiet and calming thing. So yes, we're so happy to have all of you join us here today. Adam and I were talking about what we were going to talk about today, and Adam was like, Gareth, people don't know about AI. Like they talk about AI, but they don't know about AI. And I think it's true. I think I agree. I think I sling LLM around all the time, and even I have trouble sometimes discerning. Like, wait, what makes this AI? What is the AI doing? Who is it? Does it have a name? So Adam, take us in. How would you describe this?
As usual, I can identify a victim and a villain. I mean, and a victim, but a villain. The victim, of course, is me. But the villain in the issue is as usual, bankers and greedy tech companies. Like they do not want you to think about data. AI companies do not want you to think about data. It's sort of like, I don't know, it's like if a car company never wanted you to think about gas. But, everyone knows that gas fuels cars, but people keep forgetting that data fuels AI. And they don't want you to think about it because they don't want you to think about who owns this data, what about the data I own, and what if somebody gets all the data, right? Nobody wants you to think about all that. But every time someone says AI, you should think about data because that's all AI is. And like now that you can get all these incredible summaries, it should be clear to everyone that what AI really is a condenser of data or like a summarizer of data. It quickly reveals the secrets within data, right? And those secrets, to use a slightly more complicated word, are patterns. And the reason the patterns are so powerful is because patterns create predictions, right? Just like in an image, if there's a pattern, you could finish the picture because you recognize the pattern. That is what AI is doing with real data. Now, what makes it AI different from prediction is instead of just figuring out how to finish the picture, it goes ahead and finishes the picture, right? So AI is just predictive modeling attached to some robotic function so that it doesn't just predict, it does something based on that prediction, which could lead to another prediction. So the evidence that nobody's thinking about this is that helpful?
Well, I mean, it was like, we're using really simple words, and then the last sentence is actually like something worth like digging into. I think like I want to wrap my head around it. So what makes it AI is that it analyzes the prediction. So when I think about the prediction, I think of like modeling. I think of data science teams and statisticians. They get a big pile of data somewhere, they look at it, and they say, okay, based on this data that we see, we think that these patterns exist. And like maybe like an example would be useful. What's like a good pattern? Like people click your ad that live in Des Moines.
Yeah, well, let's talk about OpenAI. OpenAI is in front of all of us. So like a good pattern is it puts words together that, is a pretty good answer or a good summary of, what George Washington did or who Claude Shannon was. Right? That's the prediction. Is these words in these order will produce a satisfying answer. And the training is the feedback. And of course, OpenAI hid all that, but there are magazines articles about it that they hired 20,000 people in Africa and the Philippines and other places to score the answers for years.
Oh, interesting.
This is a good answer. This is a pretty good answer. This one's wrong. And that's what I mean. That feedback loop is critical to creating useful AI. You have to tell it it's right or wrong. So then they release it and it looks like magic, but they just hid all the training from us. And it's still going on now. There's people employed now rating the answers and telling OpenAI's chatbot if something was a good or bad answer.
Okay, so I want to keep digging into, though, the difference between the prediction and the acting on the prediction. So in the case of the OpenAI, is the response acting on the prediction? Like, or is the response, where is
They
it?
hide that piece, right? It's like you get a fully trained release, but it's always being retrained and re-released. So they hide. You give it feedback, right, by answering another question. They encourage you to talk to it, and that feedback gets used, but not in real time. So to get an even simpler way to put it into someone's head is every AI is a machine with three parts. It's like a factory with three parts: data ingestion. It hoovers up data from somewhere and it puts it in neat little tables with consistent labels, right? Like people say that there's AI based on unstructured and messy data, but not really. There's always data ingestion pipeline. It's super hard to build. The bigger it is, the harder, and the more varied it is, the harder. Then there's a modeling capability, and most people have some, at least in AdTech, most people have some experience with data modeling, where someone takes a bunch of data and says, according to the patterns in the data, this is the best thing to buy, or this is the best price, or whatever, right? It's the modeling capability. And third, the least understood, is the deployment capability, right? That means that you have some automation of deploying the prediction somewhere that something happens and produces yet more data to be ingested, so that your process becomes a circle. Right? So if you think of it that way, right, as long as you're deploying something and the data from the deployment becomes ingested and back into the cycle of the next model, then you've got AI, right? There's some robotic function that's turning the wheel.
It's making decisions. Like, it's like,
Right, saying based on the prediction, make the decision, and then learn from what happens in the decision in your next model.
interesting. So the reply is the activation layer. The reply where it goes, hey, yeah, you asked me for a sentence. And I love the way that OpenAI does what they do. I love the way LLMs do what they do. Because it reminds me of a company called Proximic. Did you ever hear of Proximic? Did you know them back in the day?
No.
It was a contextual data provider. And Proximic's big differentiator was that they were a language agnostic. And what made them language agnostic is all of their contextual analysis was actually character analysis. So what they would do is their models would look at the raw text itself and break down the words even further than words, break them down into the letters in words. And they would do well, they didn't do shapes of the letters, but yes, the signification of the letter, right? Like the word B or BEER, and they would build their models of similar types of content based on the patterns across the letters, which means that all that they needed was something to train and say this type of content is this type of content is this. Once they had the training, they could expand it, and it wasn't done with semantic analysis.
Wasn't it fooled by homonyms? But I guess no one cared at that point.
It was 2012. Where it's make this work. That was their big differentiator from Peer 39. Peer 39 required a semantic comprehension of the text, and Proximic said we don't need that. We aren't doing semantic analysis. That's super interesting. But this idea, right, of being able to analyze.
Cool benefit.
It was such a good pitch. I really liked Proximic. But basically, I think that the reason I find this so interesting as it comes to LLMs is the notion that something could have every appearance of comprehension, right? It could have every appearance of I wrote an answer for you when not actually having comprehension, right? It doesn't understand what it's saying. What it's doing is it's looking at, like you said, a bajillion different answers that it's tried giving in the past, and looking at its training data set to say, oh, based on this scenario, I think these are the words that should show up in this order to satisfy this query. You can do it. With enough data, you can do it. You can do it predictively without, Marley saying that's what humans do, and it's yes, but we're not going to go too deep on consciousness today.
There's another level. If you look at ChatGPT, play with it as I do. Sometimes it runs a search, sometimes it doesn't. Have you noticed that? When
Yeah.
it doesn't run a search, that means it's so already trained on that that it knows. It knows, right? It's so deeply embedded in the training data. Maybe 600,000 people have asked it the same or similar question that the answer is ready. So
Mm.
it's hard to distinguish that from knowing the answer, right? Like its level of confidence that the answer it gives is the right answer, the answer that will satisfy you. That there's almost no processing and the answer comes out instantly. People have pointed out that that's not the same thing as the first time you ask it, or that it has to run a search. Like there's some capabilities are emerging out of usage from this that
Mm.
are unexpected and exciting, and maybe gets it closer to humans.
Interesting. Does Chalice do this for my ad decisions?
We're not at the point yet where nothing has to be thought about. It's pretty different. The question that a question I asked on LinkedIn, asking people for answers, was how does OpenAI get to profitability? Like they're losing 5 billion,
I saw that.
and right, they lose 5 billion a year, and a lot of their costs are getting higher, and usage of the app, the OpenAI app, can't get that much higher, and they can't charge much for it. And nobody gave a great answer. But what I think the answer is they're going to decouple it from its data set. They're going to decouple the trained AI. They're going to do just what Chalice does. And they're going to go to businesses and say, we have such powerful predictive capability in here that you could load up your proprietary data and use it to get the answers out of your proprietary data. So I think it's going to be a pitch pretty close to Chalice's, and that they're going to be in the business of creating, custom chatbots for companies and custom logistics and shipping applications. And that the reason it's hard for people to see that OpenAI has this possibility open to them is that they're so used to seeing data and AI bundled together and indistinguishable that it's hard for them to see, oh, if you separate the OpenAI modeling and deployment capability from its questionable data set of, mostly stolen and copyrighted and scraped data, and you attach it to all the proprietary data that they don't have access to yet, then you have something that people pay a lot of money for, right? Instant, brilliant, instant smart chatbots, things that can make big companies a lot smarter, right? The, Another thing that I think helps people understand AI is what goes away. People are obsessed with AI replacing humans. I say, don't be obsessed with AI replacing humans. Be obsessed with AI replacing documents. Like, we live in a business and tech world dominated by documents, right? Everything is a document. You're just like, is that documented? Is that documented? When you search things, it retrieves documents. Microsoft Office is all on the basis of documents. So the easiest way to think about what the change AI brings is no more documents, right? Because AI is pulling whatever you need out of all the documents in the world instantly all the time. So you don't. So imagine a world without any documents. Nothing has to be retrieved from a document. Everything documented anywhere is available to everyone. And that's really powerful for companies, because companies have shitloads of valuable information documented that nobody looks at, and nobody knows it exists, right?
Or
And
not
big
documented.
companies have seen this phenomenon that the company information is very poorly distributed around the company. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing, and some is by design. Like, all that can be fixed with really good corporate AI, where everything that to be known about the company is essentially known by everyone because AI makes it so accessible, so close to their minds. So
I mean,
that's how OpenAI gets profitability.
yeah, I feel like I'm such an AI noob. Like, I should be recording every word of every meeting I have and feeding it into an AI,
Yeah,
right?
we do that.
Like I should never write a product requirements document again. Like, I shouldn't be doing that. That's actually a silly thing for a human to do. I should have a meeting, and I should document all my meetings with all my clients, and I should have a meeting where I talk to my team, and the transcripts of the meetings with my clients and my meetings with my team should be more than sufficient to like
Yep.
build a requirements document. Like,
There's a guy at Chalice, the VP Solutions Architecture, Rob Mooney, and we built RobBot to get all his document information accessible to everyone by recording all his meetings and ingesting all his docs. And it saves Rob a ton of time. People could ask RobBot. Almost everything Rob knows is in there.
that's spectacular.
It's good. It works.
This is a wonderful thing. Um, I'm sure it does work. Like,
But
Uh,
helping companies do this is big business, right? That's the business Chalice is in. I'm sure it's where Gamma is going to end up. But it's not a matter of, like I say, like that deployment layer is poorly understood and is really the most important. Just like you have to have a capability that can use proprietary data and deploy it in a proprietary way. So you have to really understand the business you're working in.
but I actually spent a lot of time thinking about this because I love the categorization of data and AI because Chimera is a data company. Like the construction of our signal is what is proprietary, and I actually like get hives and am shoehorned into implementations constantly. Constantly, people are like, "Hey Gareth, can you just help us build a PMP that does this? Hey Gareth, can you just like set this stuff this way?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I can, but like I don't. I'm doing this because I have to, because this is how I make money." But the reality is, I would much rather spend all of my time just working on signal and getting signal to people who can then do the one predictive layer and two implementation layer. I would love that for that to be the case. But AdTech's just not built for that yet. Um,
Yeah, it's like now
and
capabilities and future capabilities. Like to make money, you have to do what people are asking for today. And if people were just a little smarter and future forward, they'd be asking for these capabilities that make them 40% more money. But human nature is they're afraid to.
it's coming though. And I think that this is something like that people in ad tech are somewhat oblivious to. The inability of ad tech infrastructure to be really agnostic about data transfer. Uh, we've spent so much time building all of this infrastructure and all of these relationships
Yeah,
that are hyper optimized to a thing, and that thing is user ID based transaction.
yep.
Um, that when we actually have new technologies coming up, we have new innovation, the old pipes can't do it. Like they're so hyper optimized and so hyper focused. Like if I were starting an SSP today, I would be so unabashed about I'm going to send everything to the DSP. Let the DSP tell me what they don't want, but
Yeah.
I'm blasting it all out. Like, and I'll do algorithmic optimization of for what I store and what I don't store. But it boggles my mind that that's not a thing because there's so much good data out there. There's spectacular data out there, and we can't use it.
Yeah, most DSPs are using 10-year-old tech, the API connections. Like, I mean, you're talking about the infrastructure based on IDs, but think about the API permissioning and how closed down that is. Like, it essentially creates a cartel of people with the API access and permissions, and reading, having access to the documentation, and even understanding how these APIs work. It's very arcane and closed, and like the world is coming fast where the cloud platforms are the means for data transfer here, and they just don't have this much friction. And if you want, and the extent to which privacy is an excuse around these API permissions is so ingrained and understood by everyone. Oh, you can't just let anyone get the data. So these problems will be solved in the cloud with real permissioning, with real clean room functionality to you know and things like UID2 and live ramp IDs that make it impossible to trace back. Like, yeah, like there's all this friction in the marketplace for problems that don't even exist anymore.
Yeah.
It's just friction for friction's sake now, and any DSP can become integrated into all the clouds, right? You could be integrated into Azure, AWS, Snowflake, Databricks, and all your functionality could be apps in those clouds. You don't need any APIs.
So it's really interesting because I often think, if I were starting a DSP today, how would I do it? And it would be like just such an agglomeration of other systems.
Yeah.
Because we built these monolithic ad tech companies, and in 2025, that's not the right way to do it. Like there are a million different vendors. Your job should be making a patchwork of vendors and looping them together to do
Yeah,
all of the right things.
totally. The word point solution is a bad word in the VC world, right? Oh, it's a point solution, meaning it does one thing. But in the future world, like that distinction just completely breaks down. And by being really good at one thing and connecting to others who are really good at that one thing, you're going to have these amazing custom stacks. Now, I checked my network on LinkedIn for the right word for this, and it's Kyle Shank of Facebook, formerly of Hershey, who suggested the word fragmolidation. which I'm
Oh
going to go
God.
with.
Oh no.
It's fragmolidation.
No.
The
Yeah.
fragments are consolidated into any stack you want, and that's fragmolidation, the word of the day. So expect that to become an IAB tech standard.
I mean, I think it's an important thing. The startups that are coming into the ecosystem need a frictionless way to get in front of big companies, right? To get in front of big publishers, to get in front of big advertisers. And I'm doing hand-to-hand combat right now. I'm out there closing deals with publishers. And that's work, man. That's work. The publishers don't like it. I don't like it. Like I love talking to publishers. Don't get me wrong, but I don't like doing this. It would be much better if I could talk to Cloudflare, and Cloudflare would be like, "Yeah, we'll do a deploy. Like, we'll make a deploy button for you. We're
Then you're just an
already on
option.
40%
Then you're an
of the
option with every publisher that's using Cloud.
Just an option. Let me go talk to them and tell them why they should check the box.
That's a great
Tell them
example of
why they should
fragmolidation.
Yep. Well, and Cloudflare, you saw they're getting bought aware. Did you see the product they rolled out?
Yeah. So they said they're getting bought. You said they're
no. They're getting bought aware. Yeah.
Yeah,
Which
that's
I
great.
love, by the way.
That's great. There's been a lot of interesting articles about, it verges into crypto, so we can't talk about it too much. The C chip on this show, any mention of crypto will be censored. But micropayments for publishers when they're scraped is one idea that's out there, and I actually think that there's been many discussion of micropayments around micro actions. This one might be real.
Yeah, the tricky part about micropayments for publishers when they get scraped is just how do you quantify it properly? Because the scrape only needs to happen once, unless
You should get rev share on that data forever.
Very frequency. Wow. Oh gosh. Is that a micro payment? I feel like that's a macro payment. Like,
it's useful. That's the idea. Think of what a motivation that'd be for journalism again. If you could find out something useful and be the first to publish it, you'll make it money every time that's used. That's how it should be. Because that would reward people who uncover new information. It'd be like the ultimate journalism machine. It's in Snow Crash a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I have to think through it because how do you monitor usage then, right? Like once the document is ingested and understood, you lose control of it a little bit.
Yeah.
It would need to be
blockchain.
Yeah.
Probably use the blockchain for that.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding.
I mean,
the blockchain's useless.
I mean, inefficient. A product without a clientele. I mean, a very specific subset of clientele. Don't get me wrong, like currencies that don't work and criminals. But I definitely think there's something there. Even if just publishers now get control. The reason publishers gave this control up in the first place was a silly one. It was because they wanted search traffic. That's why publishers let people crawl their websites. In abstraction, without search traffic, publishers would not let people with robots download their websites. They would not allow it because there's no reason to allow it. And if somebody wanted access to it, it would be a discussion.
Yeah. What do you think
I'm hung up on your rev share idea. I'm thinking about how I'd implement that.
I pitched a bunch of. I was in England last week, and I pitched some publishers in London. I think some friends of yours, and the market's just starting. The market for publisher value seems to be just starting to heat up. Like Wall Street Journal and New York Times are getting paid by OpenAI for their scrapes, and it's on. That's just starting gun.
Yeah, they're licensing deals. Yeah, that's why you've got me hung up on rev share. I'm like, wait, how could we do a rev share? Because let's say I'm a publisher and I want to license my content to a data provider, a contextual data provider, to OpenSensera, to one of these companies.
Yeah.
How do I get a piece of their data set, of the sale of their data set?
Yeah, we'd offer that. We'll offer that right now to any newspaper. If we want Chalice to power your offering, as a matter of fact, it's your offering. Like we would tell the newspaper, this is your offering, contextual matching and quality matching, whatever, off all your pages all the time. Chalice powers it. And you pay us the minority data share. That's my pitch to publishers. It's like we'll give you the technology to do this yourself. Or if you want to form a consortium of a whole bunch of news sites, right, that has contextual matching and outcomes based optimization built in, just do it yourself. Just license the tech.
I like that. But the rev share on the other side is okay. Chalice is running a campaign for AT&T, and AT&T wants to buy on this news publisher, and Chalice has the quality data stored. Or would you keep them separate? Would you say, publisher, when I'm doing this for you, for your deal, I'm never going to use this for one of my advertisers somewhere else?
That's where we are today, but yeah, I hear you. Like, there should be a technological way to verify, right? To be like, this is where we got it. Source to say this was sourced here.
Yeah, and then in that case, right? Like, oh yeah, this was used for AT&T. It increased AT&T's performance. The publisher benefits from that. So that's
Yeah, it's hard to make that
the
perfect,
contra argument.
especially
Yeah, it's a
without
hard one.
you don't know what they use to get their output. Like, it's a real problem. Like, just an explainability that the model gets complex enough, and when you switch from machine learning to neural net, like you lose a lot of explainability. And even OpenAI, they have no idea where it's getting half its answers anymore.
Even OpenAI doesn't know.
Welcome to our lurkers. People have been moving in and out, but we got a few people watching now. Thanks for coming and lurking. Feel free to put a question or a comment in the chat. We'd love to answer some questions about AI or publisher monetization or what it means to do things on premise, to have your own.
No. Okay. You teed it up. I've gotten in fights on the internet about this because people there's a lot of switch up terminology here. So, what is on-prem? So, on premises. Traditionally, the way that I've always used this term, the way it was used internally when I was at Rubicon, is on premises means that we are paying for rack space. So that means I have a human being who has gone to a data center and has installed a computer into a rack that I purchased on the internet. And that computer is one of my servers. I bring it online, I bring up its availability, it has bandwidth, right? Egress is going in and out.
In the early days, if you're cool, you call it iron. If you're semi-cool, you'd call that hardware. But if you're super cool, you'd be like, we have our own iron.
We have our own iron. Oh god, we have our own metal. So
server made of iron?
I hope not. That would be bad. Yeah. But the distinguishing feature here is that computer now has all sorts of needs, right? You have to pay for electricity. That's an ongoing cost. You have to pay for access to the web. An ongoing cost. You have to pay to cool it off, right? The whole day-to-day, people get real weird with this data center cooling stuff. Like Facebook builds them underwater and shit. It's crazy. Literally under rivers. It's wild. But you now have to have people who make sure that those computers are doing what they're supposed to do. And simultaneously, every once in a while, those people need to go in there and bang on it with a stick or push a button. That has tremendous cost.
Yeah.
And then there's all of the actual firmware,
distinguished from hiring a cloud provider. Hire a cloud provider, you also have a machine in a rack in a cool room somewhere on Earth, but you do not pay the human who whacks it with a stick.
And there's even less that you do. So when you are on-prem, right, you own the hardware itself. Yep. But you also own the firmware. So literally the fundamental operating system of the computer, you are responsible for maintaining, implementing, and doing all of those things. You do it from scratch. And that's actually why when Brian O'Kelly first left Right Media, the original AppNexus business model was simply providing hardware and providing servers for AdTech companies. That was they're supposedly their first business model. Is they went around.
He was
Guilfoyle.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what he told everyone he was doing. Then all of a sudden he built his own AdTech on top of it. Like, oh, what a surprise! But yes, this was a thing, and a lot of early AdTech companies paid for this. Rubicon paid for this. So at Magnite still has this. I'm 99% sure they still have their own servers that they have a team of people who sit in a very dark room all day with lots of screens with all sorts of like telemetry about how these servers are. They pay for this. This is wildly expensive. Like it's crazy. It's the now. Here's the thing: when you look at your actual usage costs, they're crazy cheap. Like how much does it actually cost me to run an application on this server? Very very little because you are paying for all the other stuff. But my gosh, the upkeep's a pain in the ass. I'll never forget the discussion. Someone would come in and they'd be like, "Hey, we got these computers in here. They're running a core part of our exchange, but they're 15 years old and like they're gonna die at any minute." These crazy discussions that have to happen, and it's super, super, super expensive to do. Like from a personnel perspective, and from just operationally, it's very intense. That is true on-prem.
Let's just back up. Let's back up the stage. This is the argument. The reason you have an argument is the argument is cloud versus on-prem. Like people brag that they're on-prem, meaning that they handle the servers themselves. Whereas I would brag, we do everything on cloud. It's very cost efficient and light. But it sounds like it's not clear which is cheaper.
So, cloud is generally full cloud, and I'm going to argue there's a middle layer here, which is like how we do things, and it's an interesting middle layer. Full cloud is and full cloud is very expensive. So generally, full cloud is very expensive for a few reasons. One is you're not maintaining any of the firmware, right? You don't do a lot of these things. It's very difficult for you to access how the computers are actually configured. You don't get a lot of choice. It's just kind of is what it is. But simultaneously, the reason it's expensive is actually where they get you in the cloud fees is reading and writing and transferring data in and out. That's the most expensive part of licensing cloud from other people, at least in my experience as a product manager building products there. Egress. The cost of transferring data to other systems. They charge you an arm and a leg. It's wildly expensive. AWS is crazy expensive. And so if you are a large AdTech company, right, you're OpenX, you're a DSP, and you're built on AWS, your fees are crazy. And the reason they're crazy is because AWS is charging you to send and respond to bid requests. And those bid requests, right, they're little bundles of information that have to be sent to other systems. Even if it does it fast, right, which is another consideration, it costs a bajillion dollars.
Yeah.
So in that scenario, right, Prem looks cheaper because the cost of the actual transactions at a like fundamental level look very cheap, but that's ignoring all of the other costs associated with running Prem, right? The human cost of doing it, if you will. And then cloud tends to be very, very expensive because they do these rack rates. It's not a question of is one better than the other. That's not a thing. There are certain scenarios where, like, this is a call that people need to make, where do you want to pay for the people who also maintain the firmware? Do you want to invest in engineers who have to know how to do that?
Yeah, it's just two different ways of running your tech business.
It is, and they're like, and really, I don't think one is better than the other. It's just a point of like, okay, for our business, where do we want to make our investment, and do we want to invest in DevOps, right? Do we want to invest in a whole org that basically has nothing to do with our core business? Because that's the thing. These are a bunch of engineers and a bunch of people who are doing something that has nothing to do with what drives value for your clients. It's just they're people who you pay, and so many people make the call. No, that's silly. That's not my business. Amazon will do it for me. Google Cloud will do it for me. I just need someone on my team who knows how to use those tools very effectively. Sure, it's more expensive, but when I compare those costs to the cost of building this muscle internally, it's worth it. Pay for the cloud. And
what's the argument? What argument did you get online?
So the argument that I got online was typically, is it worth it to do on-prem in 2025? And I don't think it ever is. Like, I don't think anyone should be doing on-prem. And the reason for this is there's a middle like road, which is what Gamera does, and it's because we're bootstrappers, and that is something called licensing bare metal. So licensing bare metal means that we don't do any of the box maintenance, right? Like I don't have humans going to data centers. I don't have people who do that. However, we get boxes that we manage the firmware ourselves, and we manage the operating system ourselves, and we manage the implementation ourselves. And that's just because I happen to have co-founders who are very familiar with doing this, who know the relevant DevOps tools, who like are comfortable doing this, and it saves me a lot of money.
That? Is AWS license?
No. So I'm sure they have a product for. Actually, they might have a bare metal product. We do it primarily with a company that was called Packet, and they got bought by Equinix. So Equinix bare metal now. But there are a bunch of providers. Like we use 3 or 4 different companies.
And you have to worry about chips. You have to worry about the chips to run the models. They're in there.
It's their job. Their job to maintain the computers. We pick the computers, right? So what like boxes are we actually licensing from them? And costs are different, like for different types of computers, but it's their job to maintain them.
Yeah. So Chalice's approach, we're 2 or 3, maybe 5 years older than you. We have a 4-time AdTech CTO who was thinking hard about how to optimize an AI flow as of 2020, and we ended up multi-cloud. We ended up mix and matching, sort of like we were talking about fragmolidation a bit. I really want you to say fragmolidation before the show's over.
I know, you're really trying to get it out of me.
Each cloud platform is doing what they're best at and what they charge least for. So we do have to move data among them, which, as you say, has cost, but we minimize that. And just for example, most storage in Snowflake and most compute in Databricks is core to how we're set up. Because of that, they both priced really low for those 2 things, and we managed to make it work and have a really efficient pipeline.
Well, and you guys don't have to do like per impression data transfer. Like that's not a thing.
Right.
You move your models around, and then the models live with the decisioning system.
We have huge model needs like while they're running. That's why Databricks is so great, because they have the Apache cluster in the cloud, so we can run absolutely gigantic, like U.S. military CIA-sized models and only pay for them while they're running.
Yeah, and the world is very different too because edge compute is a thing now. So let's get real nerdy. We're doing a real nerd topic here, real hard one.
You talked about containerization 5 or 6 times, but you're going to go somewhere else with edge?
Oh yeah, no. So edge compute, the genesis of edge compute is very different. So the genesis of edge compute. Well, let's talk about 2 different things first. So it used to be servers, right? So you would license servers in a data center.
Yep.
And you would have an application there. Someone would do something, that application would get called in that server in that data center. These data centers are typically in like 4 or 5 different locations throughout the United States, right? Like it's very popular to have one in like Potomac, Maryland, in Chicago, there are a few locations in California, San Jose, like places like that. But the brunt of this is when a computer would connect to that server, it would have to talk to it in that location. So a user is logging into their browser, an application is getting called, and it has to go to one of those central points. This is a little slow, and it's a little expensive. Edge compute, where edge compute emerged, is there's another category of company called a CDN. A content distribution network. And historically, content distribution networks served a very, very simple role. They were dumb, hyper-local hosts of content.
Yeah, it's like Akamai.
Where
Akamai
is a CDN. Yeah. You got it. But Akamai did not have a brain. There was no brain there. Their job was simply to host versions of websites and versions of content as close to the user as possible. And it actually had to be like cached and managed properly, where if you were a publisher and you wanted to get your website out there, you wanted it to be hosted in Akamai, you chose your CDN, you had to update, right, the versions of your content that existed, and that was a manual process that happened offline, and like it was a whole thing. But the idea here was that CDNs were dumb. CDNs were hyper distributed, right? So I talked about data centers earlier. There are a few different locations in the US. CDNs have a bajillion locations. They're everywhere. They are like, there is no like CDN endpoint in San Jose. Not a thing. When you're a user logging in, you hit a CDN that's hyperlocal to you, and that CDN's job is to respond really, really fast with just the raw content that you are requesting, right? A location was hit, the CDN spits the content back.
Yep.
All the CDN companies realized, hey, we have computers that are in these locations. What if we told people that these computers could start to do stuff? And that was the birth of edge compute. So edge compute means that you are able to run logic in the CDN, and the CDN is not just a dumb host of content. And it started out like some of them had proprietary coding languages, but where we are now is you can do a lot with edge compute, and edge compute is really cool.
What kind of logic? Give an example of the sort of logic that they're now doing.
Oh, I mean, you can build JavaScript applications at the edge now. So literally anything that you would want to do in JavaScript, you can do. You could say, hey, this user should get this specific configuration. Hell, I'll bet you could bid at the edge. I'm 99% sure you could bid at the edge. Like, I'm 99% sure you could build a Node.js bidder that lived in the edge, and you don't have to worry about servers anymore, and you just have to like maintain your models at the edge. It would work. And somebody must already be doing this. There must be a Node bidder out there. Someone in the audience, tell me if you know someone who built a bidder using edge compute and Node. It'd be hard, right? Because there's also just distributed computing like considerations for a bidder because of pacing and stuff like that. But
have to come through the browser, and it would have to come through a browser.
Well, so it lives in the CDN. You have to do a little coordination with how much money has been spent, right? Because each of these machines needs to talk to the other one. But this is all to say, we live in a world now where you have cloud infrastructure, you have edge compute, you have bare metal. Nobody should be building their own data centers anymore. That's a wild ass thing to do. Like, and people talk to me like there's this huge flex and like we are on-prem, we have our own data centers, and I go, why? Why? Like it's like saying I built my engine for my car. Like, good for you. That doesn't mean that it works any better. Like, it just sounds like a pain in the ass. Like, so yeah, that's where my arguments were online. As I was like, there is no reason to be on-prem in 2025. Don't do it. Like it's such a hassle, and the benefits are just so tiny. Like we're not building like.
Who was it?
God, I forget who this was. There were a few people who jumped on this. Well, because like people are told in their sales collateral, it's really important. We're on-prem. Our business is on-prem. It has these things. It's a differentiator for us. It's like no, it's not.
Let me ask you another one. A different topic. Have you ever heard of DSP preventing an SSP from giving out logs?
Ooh, I've never heard of it, but I would believe it.
You would believe it. Why?
I would.
Why would that happen?
The reason I would believe it is because DSPs are trying to hide information all the time, right? Like, so my understanding is, I love the trade desk. I'm not trying to pick on them, but there are certain things in trade desk logs that they don't expose, right? That they don't want to give you. DB360, another great example. DB360 will not give you, say, user IDs, right? They don't have user IDs in their logs anymore.
Is that true? Trade desk will give you the full URL, so they're almost.
Trade desk will give you full URL. An SSP has it, right?
Yeah, they're both.
And so as long as you could execute a join, you could get essentially your trade desk logs from the SSP. You could do it.
We do. But one SSP told us no.
Well, if I'm the trade desk and I'm trying to hide my full page URLs and everyone's running an end around on me and they're getting the full page URLs by going to SSPs and doing a join, that's why I said I would believe that a DSP would tell SSPs not to do this. I would buy it. Have I ever seen them do it? No. But I would believe that they would do this because I would believe that a DSP would, if a DSP is choosing to hide it in the first place, like, why wouldn't they take action to keep it hidden, you know? It's terrible.
Trade
I'm
Desk
not
doesn't
for it.
hide the yeah, they've made the URLs. Is that what they're worried about? Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, there's a lot of culpability in those URLs, Adam, as you know.
It's all coming out.
There's
The dark side of
a
the
lot that
net.
can hide in there, man. So yeah, I would buy it. That makes sense to me that they would do that.
But it's just
Yeah,
that
it's that's sad. That just seems awful to me. Like if you're working with agencies and advertisers, like tell them where they ran, tell them what they bought. That's crazy to me.
but yeah, the telling is one thing, but what worries me is what I was saying about data and control over AI. Like if you can't have if you're restricting access to data, you're restricting competition in AI. And as far as I'm concerned, that's the data of the advertiser. The advertiser's running those ads, and those logs are essentially their receipts. It's their
Oh
record.
my gosh. At a philosophical level, the data
Yeah.
is what they've purchased, right? Like
Yeah.
they're literally paying for that piece of data. That's what they want. The ad, sure, that's a nice thing, but the data that describes where the ad ran is as valuable as the ad running in and of itself in a way. Um, yeah, I totally agree. And there's something you always like would tell me about Google, and I want to revisit it and unpack it about being a data company versus being a company that uses the data. And do you remember this when we would have these conversations?
Oh, there's one remedy
Um,
about the split? Yes.
yes, about the remedy about the split. Can you? I know we're like running over, but can you run through that one again? Because I meant to talk about it earlier because I still like to
It's
think
the
about it.
Standard Oil remedy, right?
Yeah.
The original antitrust remedy was for Standard Oil. And the logic of the Standard Oil remedy is that oil and the refinement of oil and the use of refined oil and gas are two separate markets. And you can't be in both. You can't dominate both. So they told Standard Oil you could be an oil company, but you have to bring that raw oil to market so that other companies can refine it and there could be competition around refining it and making oil based products. And they were right. Like Standard Oil was actually holding back the car market because they were mostly refining oil for fucking lights. And when they were broken up, like people were like, oh, you can make gasoline out of this and you can make cars go and you can make cheap cars, right? The Model T comes out, right? So that argument applied to Google would be like, Google, you have a huge amount of valuable data that comes from advertisers advertising and consumers clicking things. And if you want to apply the Standard Oil market remedy, Google, you have to bring that to market. You cannot just refine that yourself because you're only going to refine it for one thing, right? For fucking clicks, right? as we've seen. And if you had to bring that to market and let Chalice and Gamera and Trade Desk and everyone go at it, they would refine it into all kinds of products, and there'd be all this competition around AI, right? Which is just, as I said, refined data. So one of the remedies on the table in the search case, not the AdTech case, is full separation between Google as a data business and Google as an AI company and refiner of data. And in that agreement, Google would be treated just like Standard Oil. They have to bring the raw product to market, the data, and sell it for its price, and let there be competition over what's done with it. And of course, they howled and said, "Privacy, this would be a privacy," but that's manageable. Like the privacy stuff is manageable. It can be manageable lots of ways.
It's
So
so
that's it.
interesting.
Standard Oil
What
remedy.
what would a data market look like?
There is a data market. It's kind of
Is there?
clandestine, but like we've been shopping for like commerce panels are really valuable for doing prediction. And there's a shitload of commerce panels. They even have them in Europe. They probably even have them in Asia. And a representative commerce panel is a really valuable asset for it's what you need to make commerce audiences.
Hmm.
So
That's
all this
so interesting.
all this retail media, supposedly all this data is valuable, but none of them are panels. It's more valuable to
Yeah.
have 10 million people who shop at all stores than to have the 50 million people who shop at Safeway. That's
And I
very
guess
many.
this is like what Axiom was, right? So like the thesis behind buying Axiom is they have this laundry list of data that when you run campaigns against it, it makes the campaigns work better. Um,
If you're good at modeling, yeah. I mean, yeah. But I'm sure it's true of Axiom and Merkle and Epsilon and Lodomy. It's true of lots of data sets. Like, I guess what one takeaway you could have from this argument about data as well is like it's commoditized. Like it's all any data could be refined into some predictions, and
Right.
I think people have gotten sort of hypnotized thinking there's like special data that creates special predictions. Well, not really. It's just
No.
that there's two companies that have hoovered up such an enormous amount of data that they're serving an enormous amount of use cases, I mean, an enormous amount of customers, mostly advertisers. They're only really predicting one thing, and that's clicks, banner clicks, video clicks, completes.
And the notion that all data can be boiled down for a given set of considerations, right? All data can be boiled down to having some sort of quantifiable predictive value for a given consideration, for a given outcome. And
Yeah.
in that way, a flat data market would be perfectly reasonable, where
Yeah.
you just log in, you see a giant menu, or you let your AI go through and do an analysis and say, this is the data we should buy.
That is happening in other markets. Like there's Microsoft, there's Azure Cognitive Services, has huge data sets around images and language translation that you could go shop and download and buy. So if you're creating image recognition software or language recognition software, you could get pre-trained models based on enormous Microsoft data sets. So it exists in the world, but not around consumer behavior so much. But anyway, that's commoditized. Like anyone, it's not that hard to start a panel. Panels don't have to be that big to be representative, and yeah, the whole privacy debate's a red herring because panels are voluntary. You can pay people to be in panels. Like, data and prediction just are not going away. Like if you lock down all the sources of exhaustive data, you just create a bigger market for panels. Some of that's happening.
I love it. We need better data markets. We need better data markets for AdTech. It feels we gotta fragmolidate it.
Thank you. Fragmolidation is fragmolidated.
And it's not how to have it in a DSP UI. That's not a thing. You need a framework for somebody to apply like a model vendor and say these are the data sets you should be licensing.
Yeah, we're working with a company like that because there's a lot of processing to do. If you take data from all different sources, there's a lot of processing to do. To make it ready for ingestion, to have consistent labeling and a bunch of other shit. AdTech Girl asked, we got one question this week. She asked, I think in reference to on-prem versus cloud, isn't one better for a startup? And I'll just say, for a bootstrap startup, you want your startup cost to be zero. So cloud is better. You don't have to buy anything at all. If you have no money, then you can make everything cloud and only pay as you go. So that is the cheapest to start out on. But you can make the case for buying bare metal as a startup.
Yeah, that's what we do, just because we're good at it. I would never pay for engineers to do it as a startup. I would, if I didn't have a CTO who does it himself, and just because he can, and it just keeps our costs low, I would.
Why not cloud? It's cheaper than cloud, even after to start out, you have to buy this bare metal, right? Or you had a cost anything.
Oh, usage based. Yeah.
Well,
it's usage based. So you and don't get me wrong, like as usage increases, like it's not like perfectly usage based. There are like little gradations, but it's not expensive. Like it's hundreds or thousands of dollars per box.
So Gasway's cheaper. I think mine's more flexible, but you kind of knew what your use cases were, or we knew we were branching out into lots of things.
Yeah, and again, it's a skill set thing too. Like it's only worth doing bare metal if it's a skill set you already possess. If it's not a skill set you already possess and you have to go acquire it, which you would have to do, that would have cost, human cost, and that's almost certainly not worth it. Like the idea that would be cheaper than cloud is nonsensical. It wouldn't be. It would cost more money.
I'm gonna ask my CTO. I'm sure he could have done it. He's got the Guilfoyle beard and affect and everything. I'm sure he could.
It's also a question of what you're doing.
I want it to go fast.
Yeah, and we have to ingest a bajillion events, right? Like we have a huge data pipeline that has to handle gobs and gobs and gobs and gobs of traffic that we have no control over. Like it can explode and surprise us. Somebody could have I mean we're already on probably I don't know tens of billions of events in a given
Yeah.
week. So our cost to connect to browsers is meaningful.
All
But
right.
yeah, it's use case oriented. But yeah, guys, we're at 55 minutes. We went over. I actually forgot a topic I have for next week, which I'll bring up, which is AI going to cause banner CPMs to go down? And we'll talk about this next week because I'm another
All right. I'll take a week to think about it. I'm going to the beach on vacation. Wish me luck, and you have a great week too. And thank you to the lurkers and AdTech girl. We'll see you all next week.
Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.